Howdy folks, we're gonna make some series of videos that I'll put together on making a cavalry holster. So my finished product, I want to look something like this. I might make it a shade darker and I'll have the button in the right spot. This was my first attempt, kind of my prototype to see how to do it. I made this out of a vegetable tan split, and that's the leather we'll be using for the one that we'll be making. I got that from Springfield Leather Company, and I think with shipping and handling, that stuff comes out to like $2 a square foot. It's still fairly thick. It doesn't have top grain, so that's kind of the downside, but still fairly thick and pretty rigid and got a really cool look. And a lot of holsters are smooth on the outside, rough on the inside anyway, so rough on the inside doesn't matter. I actually like the way the whole rig turned out. My pouches for my cartridge boxes. So before you can make a holster, first you got to have a pattern. It's an 1851 Navy by Pieta. So that was my first attempt, and I didn't make the flap big enough, so I put tape on there and made it till I liked it. Then I ended up with this. So it can be folded like that, or it can be folded like this, and then it would be on your right side. We'll be making one for your left side because that's the way a cavalry holster typically is. It's on your opposite of your strong side because I'm right-handed. So what you do first, you lay the gun on a big sheet of paper and trace around the entire perimeter of it. You can, if the camera will pick it up, you can see there's where the trigger guard would sit and everything. So you trace around the entire perimeter and then take your pencil and go from where you traced and go out a little ways. Now if you're making it for an 1851 Navy, your measurements, if you want it to sit like this one sits, the throat of the holster from one side to the other is 9 1/4 inches, and the first skinny part is 5 1/2, and the very bottom is 4 1/4. From where your throat would be to top of your flap is 5 1/2, and your flap's about 8 inches from here to here, and then you just round that out. Now you're going to want extra paper because, like I said, this one was kind of my first attempt, and I think this one was too skinny down here and the flap was too small. My angle right here wasn't quite right, so you're going to have to do some experimentation. Once you get it made, and you sit the gun in there, and I wanted it so the gun was sitting about right there, and you figure out where your flap is going to sit. So in this holster, and I'll be basically copying this, just hopefully making it a little bit better. See, it sits where the hammer is just protruding above that and the flap goes over. I could have made the flap a little bit longer, but I think that would kind of get bulky and be in your way when you're carrying it, and I tend to carry this in the woods with this holster. Historically, what I can find, the flap was sewed on back here and the holster was just a sleeve, and it didn't have the kind of a quick draw cut. And when I wet formed it, I flipped that over to make it a little easier to reholster. But with these kind of guns, you hit that wedge. But put my Heritage Rough Rider in there. It kind of swallows it up, but it would work for those two. So that's what we're going to be working on. Okay, so I got my heavy vegetable tan split from Springfield Leather. Used up probably half of this hide, and I've made a holster, 4 or 5 belts, a bunch of pouches, some other stuff. Used it for lining on a belt, so I think it said 18 to 24 square feet in the description, so really good bang for your buck in my opinion. And it's really nice, good usable leather for a lot of projects. Making a fancy holster wouldn't be one of them, but something like this, I think they work and look great. I'm just going to use a pencil. The scratch all doesn't show up too good on these splits. If you were using regular top grain leather, scratch all would be probably my choice. Could use a pen or a marker, but to me a pencil's better, as long as you can see it good enough, because it's not going to be like a totally permanent mark if you get on the main body or whatever. Okay. A few range marks here. Nothing that goes all the way through, so that'll be fine. Al Stolman round knife. Now, this knife is not the best, I don't think. It's the only one I've ever had, so I can't compare it to any other brands. But typically what I do with this is I get it started, and then I'll take a utility knife and go along where I've made basically a trough with this to guide the utility knife. So probably won't show the entire process for cutting it out, but just get started. These round knives are really good for going around these kind of corners, but either I can't get this one sharp because I'm not a professional at sharpening, or it's just not that great a quality. In thinner chrome tan leather, I love it. Usually one time through and I'm done, but with thicker vegetable tan, you don't want to get to pushing too hard and screw up. So I just lightly go over it and get a good guide so I have better control with the utility knife and finish it off that way. Yeah, you can see that line, so that's what I got to start with. And then I'll take a utility knife. With the utility knife, you want to have a fresh blade, especially when you're starting out with something like this, because if you get to pushing too hard, getting too much pressure on it, you'll slip and ruin your project. Chuck Dorset on the leather element, Weaver Leather, always says fresh blade every time. Well, I don't do it every time, but most every time, and it does make a big difference. So I'll continue on and get everything roughed out and cut, and then we'll go from there. Something else that can help you when you're cutting these out, after you, like if you're doing what I'm doing and using a round knife to get you started and then switching to something with a better blade, because that particular knife just isn't that great, when you're doing these kind of curves and up here and stuff, once you get it, like you can put your pattern down, cut around it on the outside, get a smaller thing to work with. I'm trying to save as much leather as I can, so I cut out a section along left the edge one, cut out the other one, and then made it smaller. Anyway, you want to start, just make a bunch of small cuts, and that way, and always try to cut away from your project. Like when I'm doing this line here, I won't be cutting this way, I'll flip it the other way and I'll cut down. So keep that in mind. It'll save you a lot of time and frustration, but making small little cuts rather than trying to keep your knife steady going clear around here, just you can even do an inch or two at a time, or a half inch, whatever you're comfortable with. And it saves a lot of fatigue on your hands and wrists too. when you're not trying to keep that knife steady for so long. You're lifting your hand up. You're not in the same position for that long a time. And here, when you're trying to make these more angled cuts with a utility knife, if anybody's watched The Leather Element, you've probably seen Chuck Dorset do this, but I'm making little cuts and I'm not worried about if it hits the edge here. Now I'll flip it and then work this way rather than towards my holster. Okay, it's all cut out. Now I'm going to take, I got these in a 4-pack. It's just cheap edgers off of Amazon, edge bevelers. This is the biggest one. I don't have any idea what size it's considered. I don't remember the brand. It's really not that great of a tool, but it works good enough. So we're going to just bevel the edge of all of the holster here, which actually I needed to do what I just did there, because that's going to be the part that's folded over, so I won't do this side or finish. So really you could just start like up here and right here, and then do the bottom on this side. The other side will do the whole thing. So we'll be these splits don't edge near as nice as a top grain leather would, but it still really makes it look more finished if you do. Just try to round those angles off. Alright, okay, so that's cut out and edges done. Now we need our welt, which I'm going to take this piece that came off of this side and just take my wing dividers. Got them set for between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. I'm just going to take them along that edge. Scribe a line. And that'll be our welt. Howdy folks, so got my welt, the main part of the holster, got my retainer strap, which is this thing that goes down to your button, and then the other part you need, says 4 parts, is your loop. So I've already busted that out with my strap cutter. I had it set for slightly over 2 inches. That's what I did with the other one. It seemed to work good. It fits on the belt nice, and it ends up being about 5 inches long. So for the bottom, on the historical ones I could find, they're usually rounded. I'm not going to be exact here. I'm just taking a old container here. So my cuts aren't very pretty, but by the time I get my edger and trim everything up, it won't look too bad. that'll be on the back side of the holster. So you're going to mount it whether you're doing this right or left-handed. You're going to want to hold it, get it in the position you want it, and then you'll have to sew it like that. So it'd be like this, and then like that. So I gotta look at my other holster and figure out the angle for that, but first I gotta do my edge work and stuff on this one. So I'll take my water and saddle soap and canvas and everything, and I'll get all these all slicked up nice. But before I do that, so on the bottom here I want 2 stitch lines. So I'm going to take my edge groover here, or my stitch groover I should say. I'm just going to make a line on the bottom, and I'm going to adjust it so it's about twice as wide as it was before. Put it in the same spot, go around that contour. Okay. I'm just going to connect them. The camera, yeah, you can kind of see where the groove line is. Now I'm going to do the same thing up here. There we go. So that'll be double stitched on the top and on the bottom. Now the belt I'm making for this is 2 inches, so I'm going to have to make sure that between my bend and my top stitch hole is at least 2 inches. Which if I have it bent right there, that should be about right. Now when you're putting it on here, you got to figure out your height and your angle that you want it. So typically with this, it's cross draw, so it's going to be sitting at kind of that angle. I'll probably have to do a lot of the attaching and sewing off camera just because of the way that everything kind of lines up. It'd be really hard for me to film with the way I film, so we'll pick up after I get it partially attached. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I took my ruler here and I measured down from this corner to about 2 1/4 inches because that's what it is in this holster, and I really like the way it sits. And then I figured out my angle by holding the strap at my waist until I got the angle right. Held it in place, took my awl and made marks, and then I poked holes in this part and in the back so it'll be stitched like that so you can fold it down. So I'm going to, off camera, I'll sew the ends, both sides, and then I can poke holes with my awl through here, get that all sewn up, and then we'll move this down and we'll kind of do the same thing. So that's what I'll be working on next. Before I do that though, I will edge all of these pieces, so just because that's easier to do and it's off the holster. Okay, so that's the last clip I made. Gotten that all stitched on. So like I said, I started on the corners and I put a piece of thread through that a couple times, and then poke holes in the middle and stitch all that and reinforce the edges. I did that both sides, and then I just tie a knot and burn the ends in the back so it can't fray and come apart. So now that'll sit just like that. And it has a little bit of a cant, so it'll sit kind of forward on you. So I got my welt cut out of what I cut out before, and that'll sit just like that. Now with the welt, you're going to want to glue it onto this side first, because if you try it over here, you may end up getting the top in the wrong spot. Typically, depends on what I'm making, but for this holster, I want that gun to sit down in it a little ways. So I don't want that welt to come all the way to the top of the throat. So I want it about right there, and since I cut this out of the scrap from cutting this, it is a perfect welt. It is exactly where I want it. So let's see if I can get the thing glued exactly where I want it. Sometimes that can be a little challenging. So I'm just using Fibing's Leathercraft cement, and I'm just gonna put a little bit goes a long ways with this stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of let it drizzle out and smear it on my holster. And the beauty of this, using a skived leather on both sides, rough out both sides, you don't have to rough up your edges when you're doing something like this, or rough up your other side like you would if your welt was out of top grain. It's okay if you're a little over the edge, but you don't really want to be under it, because you can sand it down a little bit if you need to. These are just binder clips off of Amazon. I got a pack with a bunch of different sizes. So I'll leave that sit for a while, and then I'll fold it over and do the same thing. The welt all glued up, and now I'm going to go to stitching. So I've got a groove line on my right side here, because I'm right-handed, so it'd be where you can't see it. And I'm going to be just poking holes all the way along with my awl. This is just a CS Osborne, more of a scratch awl, but it works pretty good. And one thing to help it slide through the leather is just a little piece of beeswax that I use for getting extra wax on my thread. You just poke your awl in there, and it'll help it slide through better. I saw that in a Don Gonzalez YouTube video. So I've already got 4 holes punched. I start by coming through one needle on the bottom hole. Take both of them through the second hole, going up towards the throat. Out my thread. pair of needle nose pliers handy in case the needle gets stuck. That way you're not bending and then risk breaking your needle. These are John James harness needles. The best ones I've ever used. So now the top 3 stitches have been double stitched, and I will just eyeball it to about the same spacing. Make my hole. Tighten up my stitch. Just poke the next hole. Just continue on. Now this may look very time consuming, and it is kind of, but I can probably do this entire length, doing through 3 plies, punching each hole individually without doing a video, probably in 10 or 15 minutes. So it's really not that bad, and kind of relaxing, and I enjoy it. I did get a CSI Osborne diamond shaped stitching awl, but the thing had such soft metal it just bent the first time I tried to use it, going through 2 ply of like 4-ounce chrome tan. This is 3 ply of like 8-ounce vegetable tan, and this is a CSI Osborne just scratch awl. And this thing isn't bent at all, and I've been using it for years, so go figure, even within the brand, you get junk and you get good stuff. So I will continue this off camera, and then we'll slick up the edges and attach the retainer snap and strap. Got everything all stitched up. I've got my flap all edged, my throat and the bottom. The throat and the bottom I did after I stitched it, but it would have been a lot easier before, but it's not that big a deal one way or the other. So I double stitched and ended my thread on the bottom here. Just kept going along there. I've got a wet rag here, just wet with water. I also took one of these sandpaper files and evened out my welt area a little more. Just get that decently wet. This is Fibing saddle soap. Not very much, just a little bit on there. It's just a piece of canvas off from the old military surplus bag. You don't need to push hard. I'm doing this pretty light. The friction in the soap and the water that are doing your slicking for you. Sometimes a little bit of soap gets caught in the crevices, and I just take one of these and kind of work it out of there. Now you can use these for it too, but I prefer the canvas. It's a little easier to work with, and I think does a slightly better job. But like for inside the welt, if you want to get that area, this thing works really good. You could use it on the entire thing if you wanted. But like I said, I like the canvas. So it's all done that way and slicked up. Next, putting the gun in, and I've already marked my holes for where I got to put my retainer, but I'll show you that when I put it together. So to attach the retainer thing, fold it, put your gun in, fold it like that, make sure that it's tight on here to here. And I just stuck my retainer underneath, so it was in the position I wanted it. And then I just took my awl and just poked through here, and then poked through there, and there, and made a mark in this part through into the holster itself, and then the flap into this. So now I got to punch those holes. I'll be using Chicago screws to attach it, and this little button for the flap. Get as close to this hole as I can. This revolving punch. It's not going to be perfect. The bad thing is it made a little dent in the top there, but I don't know how to avoid that unless I got a different punch, which might be a future purchase. Get your screw part of your button. Poked up through there. Just get my finger underneath it. I'm going to take a little bit of Leathercraft cement. This just screws on, so I'm going to just put a little tiny dab in that hole. It helps keep that in there where it belongs. Just thread that on. If I can get in there with a screwdriver, I'll tighten it from the other side too, but I don't know if I can get in there or not. Nope. So I'm just going to have to hope that finger tight here is close enough. Actually feels really good. Now for the strap here, I've got it's a 1/4 inch punch. And that won't quite fit over that, so then you take a knife and just make a little tiny slit on the top. Secret here to getting this so you don't end up going too far is to just kind of make little slits pushing straight down. Now it'll stay on pretty good but still come off pretty good. Now my revolving punch again. Be time for a new revolving punch. I'm just using Chicago screws. those push through, and then same thing, I add a little dab of glue on the inside. Now let's see if I did it right. I think that looks pretty good. So all the actual work is done. I'm going to probably end up doing a part 2 on wet forming and dye it with walnut hull dye. But as far as like the actual making of it, that's it. And that's how I do it. It'll sit just at a slightly backward cant, which is the way I want it. If it's down here, it'll be about right for a wet form. That'll be easier pulling out your gun. So you could use this for obviously any kind of gun. It wouldn't have to be a Navy Colt. Your dimensions are going to be different than what I said in the beginning, but there you are, and thanks for watching.